Hello from Jerusalem. Yeah, I haven't been on in a while, but I just want to tell you while I'm waiting for people to get on, and sometimes actually I notice this restream doesn't start like right away or like I'm like mid-sentence, but I would just like to tell you what I've actually was doing this evening before. This has nothing to do with the war, by the way. The cat just jumped on the top of the shelf. Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, yeah, so it's 10:23 right now, and I uh, just basically finished. Finally, kids went to bed and everything. We spent like so much time. The kids have a kiosk, this thing called a kiosk, and they have to actually like they bring stuff to sell. So every grade, every class gets their week, and then they have to go and they sell their stuff, at to the other kids. And so my daughter picked to do fruit skewers. And now fruit skewers, first of all, they can only sell each item for 2 shekels. If I told you how much we spent versus how much they're going to make, we are going to lose. We don't lose anything because this was like a donation in some sense. But if this was a business, that's like we're out 40 shekels at least. Like lost 40 shekels at least. Pretty disaster. I mean, it just like so I spent a few hours skewing, if that's a word. Oh, it is a word, but not in this case. Skewering fruit onto wooden sticks so that she could go sell them for 2 shekels each and lose at least 40 shekels in the process. Of course, nobody gets to lose. No, they're going to make off of that maybe 60, and then they're going to say, look, oh, there's this plus the 60 times all the other students, and this is going to be great for the school. So anyway, or it's great for the class, and they're going to feel like they made money, but it's really because the parents spent the money and did the work. But whatever, it's part of, I guess that's part of like our job. Okay, anyway, day 66 of the war between Israel and Hamas. If you lasted this long of my rant of complaining about school, I didn't even start talking about fifth grade math and fractions in another language. I have to do this in another language, which means I have to learn fractions all over again, and the words for them in another language. Okay, but anyway, forget that. All right, so the war is still going on. I know, like I realize that I'm realizing and talking to people that maybe not everybody knows what is happening because it's not reported as much. It's not front page news. It's not top of the hour for all of you guys anymore if you're overseas. But for us, we're still living it. Now, granted, when I say we're still living it, of course, like I've said before, here in Jerusalem, it's like really normal. Like we're back to normal, and in many ways, but there is like a war going on, and in fact, 100, more than 100, it's now 104 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the ground war, which was something that took a while for Israel to get into. Hold on a second. I can't talk late at night. I really should call it quits, like at a certain point, but like a certain hour. But anyway, so 104 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the ground war. Now, of course, people say, well, how many Palestinians? And of course, 17,000 is the latest number. So, but the comparison, just to give you the perspective, when Israel is doing airstrikes, no Israeli gets killed, no Israeli soldier gets killed. But when they're in the ground, everybody knows that's where it's going to be more dangerous, and where the country then, people start getting politically involved, like whether or not Israel should be doing a ground invasion. But it looks like, so I think one of the cat is about to jump from a height to I don't know where. So if the TV crashes in the middle of this, Excuse me. Okay, so the last time I perhaps when we were speaking, I was it the hostages, but you saw a lot of the hostage releases, and then the truce ended, and no hostages have been released since then. But both Israel and Hamas went right back to fighting right after that. So Israel had been operating in the north and taking over Gaza City. And right now, they're also operating in the south, in Khan Yunis, and in other areas around Gaza. So I'm not 100% sure what to tell you if the strategy is there's what specifically is sending them also to the south. But they're both in the north and the south. It's getting intense. I know people who have friends or children in the army, and they'll say like that when they go in, they're in for 2 weeks or a month. There's no phone contact, and that's it. We don't hear from them. But the rate of soldiers killed seems to be steady at least two a day. Sometimes, like today, there were four, and so you just see that picking up. Um, and and then, but at the same time, the military is saying like, oh, Hamas is surrendering and they're weakening, and we've got the north and we're going for the south. So anyway, that's ongoing. You probably know, or you may have heard about the tunnels that have been found under Gaza, and I read somewhere 300 miles. Now, I would really like to question that because Gaza itself is only 26 miles from north to south. So how do you get, like, I can't picture, yeah, I mean, it's like just like your intestines are somehow 7 feet long, right? But like, how are there that many? How is there 300 miles worth of tunnels underground? But the what do you the also the soldiers who are and the hostages who have come back have said like that they were in tunnels. So there's definitely a tunnel. There's a huge tunnel network that they use to get around. So the people, when you hear the number of Palestinians dying, you can be sure that many of the terrorists are not in that number. They are underground and can flee the bombs that are being dropped, but not everybody can. So I think that's also become a source of frustration for the Gazans. What you've heard now doesn't mean suddenly they are pro-Israel or they love Israel. But they are very frustrated. In fact, a lot of the stories that are coming out now about like the humanitarian aid that has now been renewed, even though they're fighting, like during the first part of the war, before the hostage release, before the truce, there was no humanitarian aid whatsoever. Then during the truce, they allowed it in, and now they haven't stopped actually with the aid. It's still going in, but there were several clips where you can see the somebody saying like, you see this bag of salt that's normally like 5 shekels or 4 shekels, and now they're selling it for 40. So they're getting it free as humanitarian aid, and somebody is turning around and selling it at outrageous prices. And many people have been displaced. I mean, I heard somewhere 2 million people have been displaced. That is every single resident of Gaza. So that number cannot be accurate. But I would say if somebody said that 1 million have been displaced, that sounds to be that is possible. Well, obviously, that's a huge number. Another thing I want to tell you about what's happening this is something that you wouldn't get for sure unless you live here. But I have the radio on as I'm driving, and the one thing that they say is there's a commercial that they've been playing now. I don't actually know what the commercial is for. Like, what company, or is it a company, or is it just a nice PSA? But it talks about that number of Arabs who were also killed on October 7th, Arabs in Israel, Israeli Arabs, whether they're from the Bedouin community down south, they were affected, or, a lot of first response workers are also Arab. And a lot of them were also killed or wounded. Rockets hit a town, hit a Bedouin community, and several people were killed, including a 4-year-old. So when I hear these commercials, they talk about that, and then they say our fate, or like our fate is mutual, or we're together in this, and what happens to one happens to the other. So I found that really fascinating, that they have this sort of response, that it's not, you don't feel the total. They're maybe trying to counter any sort of racism that could be going on, and try to say, like, look, they died too, and also, like, from both ways, like, to try to counter any racism coming from the Arab community or coming from the Jewish community, and try to say, look, we're in it together. Now, speaking of that, I spoke with a friend who's a doctor at one of the hospitals here in Jerusalem, and I said, "Hey, has your work been?" I asked him, "How has your work been impacted due to the war, or not so much because you're not close? We're in Jerusalem, and like I said, like almost like nothing's happening here." And he was like, "Oh yeah, for sure." And I'm like, "Really? How?" Thinking, have they flying in the wounded? And he said, "No, it's actually certain groups of doctors refusing to work with other groups of doctors, or somebody posts something on Facebook or on social media, about, pro-Hamas, or that, or even pro-Palestinian, but taken as anti-Israel. And so Israeli said, well, I won't work with them anymore. And so it's created a lot of friction with the staff, and restaffing issues. So anyway, so that's another aftermath that we're looking at now. Today was another interesting day. What is the most random day of, Monday, December 11th? And I called somebody, and he said, well, I'm not working today, there's a strike. And I was like, okay. So now I was speaking with an Arab, and I was like, so there's a strike. And I'm like, wait a second, so strike, does that mean like the motor workers go on strike, or the trade union? No, this is a general strike in the entire Arab world and pro-Palestinian world. And it was widely observed. In fact, my kids told me that some kids didn't go to school today. They stayed home because of the strike, even Jewish kids, but mostly it's adhered to by Arabs. So no shops were open in the old city, or at least were not supposed to be open. By the way, there's no tourists anyway, so very sad. But it was called World Strike Day, to sympathize with the Palestinians in Gaza and against Israel. So so apparently they called on anybody who was taking part in this to not use credit card, do not make any purchases, not cash or credit card, no bank transactions, do not use social media accounts, but write the reason for that first before you don't use it, and do not leave the house except in urgent cases. The prime minister of Lebanon announced that Lebanon officially joined the strike. So that meant like government offices and the public sector was shut down. So I think, now I'll be catching up on the news, how it went, and how, I didn't feel it here as much. It had also in Istanbul and in Amman, and obviously East Jerusalem and the West Bank. So that's one thing for me to catch up on later, for sure. I didn't even know it was happening until suddenly, like, kids are saying, "Oh, strike tomorrow." I didn't hear about it. Now, something else. There was just a report in the Washington Post today that Israel has been using white phosphorus. I believe they said in Lebanon, Now, I had heard this actually since right after October 7th, when the war started, that Israel was using it as well in Gaza. Now, the IDF said that in no way do they ever use it, and there is none of that in their in what they use. I'm going to tell you what actually. White phosphorus is a chemical waxy, yeah, this is Wikipedia. No, it's actually World Health Organization. Solid substance typically appearing yellowish or colorless. Some have described it as an odor resembling garlic. It ignites instantly upon contact with oxygen. So it really it's I think it's a banned weapon under international law. So the IDF said, no, we do not use it. So they're saying the Washington Post article is wrong. So there's that's something else out there today. Another thing, maybe you have seen the photos of uh, Israel Israeli soldiers arresting Palestinians in Gaza. Because now I guess they're at a phase where there are some portions of Gaza that are under Israeli control. So they arrested dozens of men, and they released pictures of these men lined up, like with hands tied behind their back, in wearing only their underwear. As soon as I saw these photos being released, I said, okay, this is a disaster. And sure enough, the U.S. Puts out a statement that they're deeply disturbing pictures, and they want to question Israel, like why is this necessary? Why? And then Al Jazeera, commentator on Al Jazeera said, this is like Abu Ghraib all over again. So this was probably not a great. So and then an Israeli commentator, I don't know what to call him, who is big on social media and stuff, very, very pro-Israel, like everything, the party line, and pretty extreme, writes. His caption for it was that the new uniform of Hamas. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, this is just not how you deal with serious issues like this. So it looks like Israel's backtracking now, and they're not going to be uh, releasing that. Now, why do they strip them down to their underwear? Okay, I can understand from a security standpoint. All right, you want to make sure there's no weapons, there's no suicide belts, there's no, hidden knife or whatever. Okay, but don't release the pictures, right? I mean, at least, like, this thing in the Middle East, it's called like respect, and just a little bit. I understand what anyway, there's just, you got to play this game, like the PR game. I don't know. So that's going to be an issue probably that rages for a while now in the media, and Israel certainly is not they're certainly getting it in the media. If what you are watching in the US, what you may not be seeing in Israel, I could tell you that, but I know what you're seeing in the US is all of the protests and the universities and stuff like that. So I'm sure that's going to be thrown in there as well. And now you know where that comes from. So anyway, yeah, here Al Jazeera is talking about the ceasefire, or the strike that was going on. It was all over the Arab world, so it was pretty big. So maybe it didn't happen in your country, but it definitely happened here. So the strike was supposed to just be Monday, and so I think it's coming to an end, but we'll see if it continues. Emily, that was an answer to your question. So also, let us not forget that the war is not just in the south. That Gaza is a small strip of land, on the coast, like southern Israel, and it borders with the Mediterranean, is with Israel and with Egypt. But there is still the north, and the north is still evacuated for like all along the border with Lebanon. Hezbollah is the terror is a terrorist group based in southern Lebanon. They are also part of the Lebanese government because they ended up getting elected, and they do also like social projects, yeah, social welfare projects. So they got popular. They ended up getting into the government. So, but they are armed. They're heavily armed. They're better armed than Hamas, and have uh, longer range missiles, and they have been using them. Hi, Tony. Hi. So yeah, it took over the living room. Okay, so that's still going on as well. Now there are still uh, over 100,000 Israelis living like displaced, like not they're evacuated from their homes in northern Israel or from southern Israel, and they were they're not up in the north because there are constant rockets and missiles coming in from Lebanon, and they're mostly getting shot down. Some are landing in open fields. One actually hit a house actually this evening, which was empty because everything's evacuated. Very few casualties up north, and it's kind of like the thing you can almost ignore because nothing seems to be happening except for the fact that people are not able to move to their homes. Now, there's something that I want to find the exact quote that the defense minister said about the North. I don't know where I have it. Oh, okay, yeah. Apparently, I didn't know he spoke with him. Because it's not, I was looking for the wrong person. Okay, Gantz, who is the former defense minister. Oh, there he is. Look, I just said that. I wonder if that's what he's talking about. Okay, so anyway. And I was actually thinking of Gallants, who is the defense minister, and this guy's the former defense, Betty Gantz, former defense minister, spoke today with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and he said that Israel will need to remove the threat posed by Hezbollah along the northern border. So it looks like at this point that Israel is sort of taking its time with, focusing on finishing the work. I cringe when I hear other reporters say this, but by the way, thank you, Paula Stearns. Paula says blessings on us, Tony. I know because I just said it. Anyway, that's so funny. But anyway, so he's staying away from the camera. So I cringe when reporters say like, oh, when Israel is finished in Gaza, like it's a given that Israel wins. Like, I mean, maybe you can say, oh, the odds are this and that, and they're better armed and this and that. Yes, understood. But like how can you say that they win? I cannot, like, who can say what the outcome is going to be? So that people are talking about, oh, the day after, who's going to take over Gaza? Now Israel, of course, is saying because they're going to their mission is to dismantle Hamas entirely and remove them from Gaza. So in any case, maybe what they're doing is waiting until they have like control of the south of Gaza so that they can then focus on the north. And then the question is, do you just, as Israel, open up this huge front in the north and just, bomb and whatever, like, and provoke Hezbollah, which is kind of quietly just shooting missiles here and there. By the way, 100 of Hezbollah members have died in this very low flame battle that's going on the north, which is just a couple of rockets here and there, but they have taken losses. But will Israel just go in full force and say, okay, like we're taking out Hezbollah, and then provoke a war, and then then the missiles reach everywhere in Israel. So that's like it's a big step. So here is what the current defense minister said, Yoav Gallant, said that Israel plans to force the Hezbollah to move away from the border before their residents can return home. And I guess they'll look for a diplomatic solution, but at this point, they're. So he said, his quote is, "When we complete the fighting in Gaza, we will be in a different reality in which military efforts will be redirected largely to the north." So that is what they're waiting for the South to get under control, and then they'll go to the north. And if you watch The Office, you would say, "I will attack you from the north." And then you would understand that that is an actual very serious issue. Okay, so I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Oh, I've been wanting to say this for so long and I never get to it. But I talked about the tunnels before. The tunnels in Gaza. And so just to backtrack, I don't know if I ever mentioned that the name of this operation, the name that Hamas has for this operation, is called Al-Aqsa Flood. And Al-Aqsa is the mosque in Jerusalem that is where all like the Muslims come to pray. It's not the holiest site in Islam, but it is the mosque here in the region. And so whenever it's on the Temple Mount, which is where the temple was, the first and second temple was destroyed, and that's not there anymore, but eventually it became the place where the mosque was built. So Jews and others are allowed to go up to that site, but only at certain times. Anyway, it's very what's the word? A flashpoint. It's a flashpoint site. So if any little bit status quo is upset, it could trigger some kind of violence, whether it's rockets or violence between police and some of the Muslims that are going there. If like a Jewish cabinet minister goes up, it always is very tense because like somebody from the government, and it's like, oh, they're trying to take over. So anyway, they named their the Al-Aqsa Flood, which is Tufan Al-Aqsa in Arabic. So this they were obviously pointing to the Temple Mount itself or this mosque as saying that this is the reason, and actually when I first heard their name, I was wondering if the intention was to get from Gaza geographically to Jerusalem, which would have been that's like half the country pretty much. So when the Israeli army decided to take on the tunnels, one of the things that they're doing is like getting seawater into the tunnels to start to flood them. And they actually dropped leaflets into Gaza that quoted a verse from the Quran that says, "And the flood washed them away for their sins." So I think I wonder if that was a connection, if they were trying to make the connection, like we're flooding your tunnels for what you did. So anyway, there you have it. Just some interesting tidbits. This one, was, I think was very fascinating. And the flood, and we'll see. We're still, we're still in the middle of it. And anyway, day 66. No movement on hostages. There's still, I think, 137 from the Israel side that are there. Of course, not all Israelis, but that were taken from Israel. Most of them are Israeli. And there was another one that was recently killed as well, a 25-year-old man who Hamas released a video of him saying his name. I think it was like in maybe day 40 something. And then later they showed like uh, a what do you call it, like a smear of blood, like not a lot of blood, and then they showed his body, and they say he was killed because of Israel, but it looks like he was tortured, like it really looks like even an eye was gouged out. So we don't know what's happening. There's been radio silence on the situation of the hostages at this point, though the families are still petitioning the government to do anything to get their loved ones out. But it's all at a standstill right now while the fighting goes on. And that's where we're at. So, anyway, thank you so much for joining. If you have questions, leave them in the chat. And also, what do you call it? Like, what do you want to hear? Like, if you have, like, there's something that you want to hear more about, let me know, and I'll see if I can get it to you. But that's it. Thank you very much, and have a great day wherever you are.